So hey everyone, today I want to talk about Doom Eternal and some of the things I think can be improved with the controller options. I'm going to start with the aiming. So to start, Doom Eternal's dead zone is a 15% circular dead zone. You won't see too much acceleration occur when I pass the thresholds because the acceleration starts very slowly, but that's what it is. 15% is a pretty small default dead zone size compared to the average for most games, which is normally about 20 to 25%. However, 15% is still a reasonably large dead zone size, and Eternal doesn't have options to control this. Being able to set lower dead zones would make making precise adjustments easier, as well as make aiming feel more responsive in general. But on the other end, for players whose sticks are worn or lean considerably, they might find themselves getting unwanted cursor drift, and being able to raise the dead zones would be able to address that. So, dead zone option is what I'd request to address these issues with a range of maybe 0 to 30%. That should cover everyone. The next is Doom Eternal restricts diagonal movement around the axes, so I can make bobbing motions like this, but you'll see the cursor's moving perfectly left. It's much more obvious when looking straight up or down, where you don't see diagonal movement occur until you break into these green regions. And of course the issue with this is that diagonal movement's incorrect, because where you're pointing the stick isn't where the cursor's moving. So the request for this is an option to either control the amount of this, so we can control if it's what it is currently, like around 20 degrees, or we could set 5 degrees or something like that, or a simple toggle to give us full diagonal movement. Either one would address this. The next issue is once you move your stick past about 95% of the way, the acceleration will spike. It's a lot more obvious when looking straight up or down. You can see once I pass the threshold, the acceleration spikes a little bit. Having an option for the intensity of this would be requested. So if players don't want to play with this, they can disable it, or they can use the default. Maybe even offer a higher scale if players would like more of that. But having an option to disable that or control it would be requested. Now for the range, this outer dead zone, it'd be nice to have an option to control that too. One, to increase it so that we can get back a tiny bit of range of motion, but it probably will be more useful for some players to reduce it, because some players, their thumbsticks are failing or whatever, and they can't move their stick far enough to trigger the acceleration or the maximum acceleration, and being able to lower this would allow them to keep playing without being cut off from certain values. The next issue is the horizontal and vertical sensitivity sliders are not even. The vertical sensitivity is half as sensitive as the horizontal. So as you can see here, I'm using 50% horizontal and 100 vertical, and you'll see in game that they're the same. And the issue with this is that you're kind of limited to 50 horizontal sensitivity, because while you can increase this to say 100, the vertical sensitivity will be lower. And so if you want the axis sensitivities the same, you're limited to 50, because you can't raise the vertical sensitivity any higher to maintain the ratio. Additionally, when the axis sensitivities are different, this also skews diagonal movement, and I'm going to use an extreme example. So when you put it an extreme like this, I can move at a about 45-degree angle, and you'll notice that it's moving very vertically, much more than what it should be. And that's because the cursor moves, the cursor angle is biased towards a more sensitive axis. So using the opposite example now, where we have very horizontally biased axis, you'll see that I'll make the same directional movements, but now it's very horizontally biased. So having different axis sensitivities changes your diagonal movement. So this, even if you are fine with differing axis sensitivities, your diagonal movement is also being changed. So this also, if you want, correct diagonal movement, you're still limited to 50 horizontal sensitivity because you can't raise the vertical sensitivity any higher. So the improvement for this would simply be rescaling the vertical sensitivity to be as sensitive as the horizontal sensitivity slider. So when you set 50-50, you get 50-50. And when you set 80-80, 100-100, you're getting even axis sensitivity. So this would allow you to play at higher sensitivities while still maintaining the same axis ratio and correct diagonal movement. The last thing for aiming is it'd be nice to get an option for the acceleration curve. Acceleration curve in Doom Eternal is quadratic, and that's fine. Acceleration starts very slow and then builds up, but this might start too slow for some players. Some players might prefer a more linear curve or any increment in between. Some might even want a higher degree curve, so they might even want to go up to a cubic or any increment in between that, so like 2.3 or whatever. And having a slider that with that range would allow them to do that. Alright, so moving on to the weapon wheel. The main issue with the weapon wheel is that there's a delay before it registers. This is because the weapon wheel is shared with the previous weapon, so when you tap the right bumper by default, you switch to your previous weapon, and when you hold it, the wheel appears. So the delay is to make room for the tap input. The problem with this is the delay makes it so that, there's a delay between every weapon, switching to any weapon that isn't your previous weapon. So you can switch between your previous weapons instantly. But if I wanted to switch to the plasma rifle but did so too fast, I'd end up switching to my previous weapon instead. So to demonstrate that, try to switch to the plasma rifle and my previous weapon. If I tried to switch to the rocket launcher, which is left, previous weapon. Same with the heavy assault rifle, which is right, previous weapon. So this creates a hard cap on how fast you can switch to any other weapon that isn't your previous weapon. And as you might have noticed when trying to switch, you see my camera moving around, and that's because before the wheel registers, the right stick is still controlling the camera. So essentially, if you switch too fast, you're kind of punished because you will likely get your previous weapon instead of the weapon you wanted, and your cursor is moving around when it should be stationary. So to address this, an option to control this delay time would be requested, so that players who want to keep it default can do that, and players who want to just use the wheel and have it appear instantly can completely remove the delay and play like that. And maybe have it granular so players can customize it in between, so that they can still some can still access the previous weapon switch, but still get a slightly faster weapon wheel time. And this should cater to everyone's preferences. The next issue with the weapon wheel is that rebinding it changes which stick controls it. So if I wanted the weapon wheel on the left bumper, this actually changes it so the left stick controls the wheel, and the right stick still controls just the camera. This is pretty uncomfortable because with it on the left bumper, the right stick would still be a perfectly comfortable method of doing that, and you wouldn't be cutting your movement out, cutting your movement off. But that's how this works currently. Um, Really, the fix for this would be allow players to control which stick controls this, rather than have it automatically assign which stick does it, so that we could, no matter where we set the weapon wheel, we could control which stick controls it, um, and that would address that. Lastly is in the arsenal for campaign, we can customize the position of each weapon on the wheel as well as the size. This is pretty awesome customization, but this doesn't apply to battle mode. So you might have a completely customized layout here, but you can't use it in battle mode. Battle mode just uses the default layout. So maybe instead of having this in the arsenal, which might be a campaign exclusive part of the code, I'm not sure how that works, moving this functionality into the control settings, just add a customized weapon wheel tab here, might address that so that players can use the same layout they have in campaign in battle mode. Alright, so for this last section of the video, I just want to talk about movement. This isn't as important since players will mostly be pegging the stick at all times. But as you can see here, the graph's a little crude. It's not formally tested, but it should be close enough to... So this red region, of course, is dead zone, and this illustrates when movement starts occurring. The actual dead zone seems to be smaller than this because you can dash correctly even if you're not moving in the correct direction. And this also seems to have the same restricted regions that aiming does, but it's difficult to formally test. Anyway, the main issue I want to get onto was your movement starts very slow and then builds up, but once you hit this outer threshold, you see the full run speed apply. And this can feel a little less than fluid, a little clunkier, because much of the stick isn't registering any movement at all, and or extremely slow movements. It isn't really until you move to like the last 10% where you're really seeing any speed start to happen, especially your maximum speed. So I think having a linear transition, just a straight linear transition from your slowest speed you can manage to the fastest speed you can output, would be a nice way to smooth this movement out. Additionally, probably the biggest complaint I've seen is players having trouble with kind of slow movement. So they'll be able to move normally in certain directions, but other directions they'll find themselves moving super slow. And this is probably because their stick isn't able to output far enough in certain directions to see full movement speed occur. And like what I've said with aiming, it'd be useful to get inner and outer dead zone options. The outer ones to be able to pull in so that players whose sticks can't reach this threshold fully will be able to see full maximum run speed output, even if their stick isn't tilting as far as it should. And this is kind of exacerbated by having such a big difference between this kind of max speed and then the speeds under this threshold. If it was a linear transition, well, you still wouldn't be able to see your maximum output speed, but it wouldn't be as dramatic as it is currently. So getting dead zone options and changing this to a linear curve would both make it smoother and help players whose stick can't reach that far. But I think that about covers everything. Hopefully we can see some of these things added in one of the future patches. Doom Eternal is a phenomenal game, but I feel that these issues are kind of holding it back, and these issues also exist in 2016 and were just as bad there. So hopefully, if its offer sees this, we'll see some improvements in the future. But anyway, thanks for watching, and have a good rest of your day.